Tonight, as you know, ladies and gentlemen, we have Deborah Tavares of www.stopthecrime.net and primarywater.org, but that's www.stopthecrime.net is her that's the number one. But if you want to go, the other one is I believe www.primarywater.org is her second one. Deborah, are you there, beautiful?
Well, yes, I am, and thank you for having me on the show tonight. And we're very happy to have John from Ireland reporting with us this evening as well. And let's jump into this again. This is Deborah Tavares with stopthecrime.net, our primary website, and then we also have primarywater.org. We're going to talk for a few minutes about some headlining events, and then we're going to bring in John from Ireland and find out what's trending headlines and what kinds of things John is experiencing overseas. But I want to encourage everyone to go to stopthecrime.net, go to our Hot Topics link. You're going to find a number of things that I'm going to recommend that you download and read. One is a document entitled CIA 1960, Memorandum for Climate Control. And it's very important. What they say is, our eyes are useless if the mind is blind. Very important to understand what is happening with the deliberate large-scale manipulation of the Earth's climate, and then along with the manipulation of frequencies. We are experiencing a greater degree of discomfort with frequencies, and we're going to talk about that. But it's very important to understand the enormity of what we face and the kinds of things that we need to do about that. People ask, well, what are the solutions? Well, there are no solutions if people don't understand the problem. And everyone is listening, I hope, and coming up with their own solutions. There is no cure for many of the things that we face other than knowledge and making different decisions where we can, while we can, and we'll discuss a bit of that this evening. Very important. But what is very important about the CIA 1960 Memorandum for Climate Control is the comprehension of the uncomprehendable. And what does that mean? Well, climate control is warfare. And it is certainly exacerbating and creating massive floods, fires, which were inundated with fires here in Northern California. There are many things coming out of the fires here in Northern California, such as the difficulty for people to get insurance on their homes, now that, by and large, the entire state is considered high fire threat. Also, what is, again, happening besides wildfires? We've got dead forests because of the geoengineering and all of the many decades of chemtrailing, the killing of the forests. We have fracking. Tsunamis are created. We have a YouTube up. I would recommend everybody watch it. It's called Coastlines Under Attack, Storm Surges Artificially Created. Understand how tsunamis are being created. That will explain much of what is happening. Also, we know that the water cycle is being privatized completely, globally, and we now have a state of emergency in parts of Florida about the toxic algae, and we have sunlight deprivation. And also, what this is all leading to is literally the inability for us to breathe. This is eliminating our oxygen. So climate change is occurring. It is man-made by the powerful. It is a weapon of mass destruction. It's all part of a massive worldwide water grab and causing mass death. We'll go into that document on another show, but in the meantime, I wish that everyone would just download this document and take a look. We're going to talk about what was recently disclosed by a scientist, a researcher out of San Diego School of Medicine, regarding the U.S. diplomats that were hit with directed energy weapons in Cuba. Now, it's very interesting to know what happened. Many of you that are aware of the effects of what the weapons do to all of us, because hopefully you've downloaded the symptom list from stopthecrime.net and you understand the microwave radiation frequencies and the symptoms and how this is jamming our immune systems. There are many, many symptoms, and please download this. But again, I remind you what we were told some months back in an article that disclosed that there were 21 U.S. Embassy employees. They said that suffered a variety of injuries from attacks of an unknown nature. And they go on to say that the affected individuals had exhibited a range of physical symptoms, including ear complaints, hearing loss, dizziness, headaches, fatigue, cognitive issues, and difficulty sleeping. They go on to tell us that investigators have been able to determine who is responsible or what is causing these attacks. And this is what we read in the papers during these attacks. Now, keeping in mind that not only were U.S. diplomats attacked in Cuba, but there were also Canadian diplomats and diplomats that were also attacked in China as well. So they go on to tell us that the State Department ordered the departure of non-emergency personnel assigned to the U.S. Embassy in Havana, Cuba, as well as all family members, until the government of Cuba can ensure the safety of the diplomats in Cuba. They go on to say that the embassy will be reduced to emergency personnel in order to minimize the number of diplomats at risk of extreme exposure to harm. In conjunction with the ordered departure of the diplomat personnel, the State Department has issued a travel warning advising U.S. citizens to avoid travel to Cuba and informing them of the State Department's decision to draw down the diplomatic staff. They go on to say they have no reports that private U.S. citizens have been affected, but the attacks in Cuba are known to have occurred in the U.S. diplomatic residence and hotels frequented by U.S. citizens. The department does not have definitive answers on the cause or source of the attacks and is unable to recommend a means to mitigate exposure. Now let's talk about what Dr. Robert Duncan has to say about that. Dr. Robert Duncan responded to this by saying, "I hate pointing out the obvious, but the State Department is lying or scientifically dumb or both. These weapons are well known since the 1960s, and they only have to talk to the CIA or Department of Defense to learn about them. They claim a handful of U.S. citizens have complained about the same symptoms, but that's also untrue. I have seen all the emails and letters to the Department of Defense, and it numbers in the tens of thousands. The U.S. government has become so corrupt and incompetent that they don't represent the country's values anymore." And he goes on to also say that when the U.S. citizens are in that exact same situation, and they've testified in front of the Presidential Commission for the Study of Bioethical Issues, they were 100% ignored and left exposed to those injurious attacks. So what Robert Duncan is saying, why the lie? He has two thoughts about this. It goes on, the usual reason for the denial is that the Department of Defense doesn't want the population to panic, and or they don't want small countries to catch up with the U.S. or other killing weapons or find other defenses. Or we don't want the population to know how we do false flags all the time to control their popular and political views and emotions. So this is all controlled. We know that we are literally under attack with psychotronic weapons. People say, well, don't travel to Cuba. Well, I will go as far as to say, for many targeted individuals, not only in the United States, but overseas in Cuba and in China as well, we're all under attack. So understand the symptoms, download that symptoms page so that when you start getting hit with the frequencies, you'll know where this is, and you'll need to relocate. Hopefully that might help reduce some of the symptoms, because we find different areas affect us differently dependent on the type of weapons being used. So with that having been said, we're going to address this with John from Ireland this evening as well. And we have a very hot topic of things that we're going to be discussing this evening when we bring John on. Just to remind everybody, John will be joining us on a monthly basis. He is our overseas correspondent. He is a journalist and a writer and a researcher, and he lived originally on the south side of Chicago. He has lived in Ireland in a town called Leixlip, and he's lived there now for about 35 years. And he became alarmed about electromagnetic frequencies and signals from cell towers. He has written many articles on the topic of electromagnetic radiation and has traveled to over 8 countries in the last 18 months to explain the dangers humanity is facing from the proliferation of electromagnetic radiation. Also, John circulates a regular newsletter with contributions from people from around the world to alert the dangers we are all facing. So with John, with all of this bio, and John, all that you do, I'm so happy you're here this evening to share with the listeners what you're seeing happening in Ireland, and also the topics that we're going to be discussing this evening. So John, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, Deborah, I have to respond by saying it's an honor to be talking to you with all that you do. I don't know how you get the time. It's amazing how one little thread of a threat from a cell tower leads you down so many different avenues, and they're all related. And microwave radiation just is the first line of defense. But you are a Trojan, and I really admire, and a lot of people around the world admire what you do.
Well, John, I want to thank you, but I also want to say I have children. I have grandchildren, and I look at other people's children and their grandchildren, and I look at the people that are too busy, as I was in my working day, and I did not have the time to understand or even know any of this, and I knew nothing of this back in the day. And I will tell you, when I talk to kids now in their 20s and 30s and 40s that are understanding what we face, I didn't know those things in my 20s, 30s, and 40s. And what I know we're doing, John, is spending our time alerting people so that what types of protections we can muster and come together with to protect ourselves. We must. We're in a direct assault by Luciferian attackers, pedophiles, and people that absolutely have no sympathy for anything that is good and decent. And it's a murderous agenda that we all face.
I agree with you 100%.
That having been said, John, I know that you've got a number of things that you want to cover tonight, and I'm interested in knowing about the article that you apparently delivered to the Pope when he was in Ireland recently.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't. I didn't deliver it personally, but I did my best. Basically the story is of a father. He's 42 now. He is so qualified, it's incredible. He's one of the most highly qualified people in wireless. He is the man in Ireland to go to for wireless services. He's wired the Financial Services Center. He's was described in the Irish Times as a man on a mission to connect all of Ireland wirelessly. He holds the first test and trial license in Europe, in Ireland. The test and trial program is run by the Irish government, where they invite companies or any entity actually, from around the world to come and test their wireless technology on an unsuspecting public. This has been going on for quite a while, and we have a lot of multinationals here, the most notable of which is Intel. Intel has a large campus just half a mile from my home, and I was as innocent as everyone else of what their presence meant here. So the story, anyway, revolves around this man. I haven't been given permission to use his name just yet, but the title of the article was "Irish Father Asks Pope Francis to Curb EMF Radiation in the Classroom." Now, this has opened up a whole Pandora's box. Another one. The situation is that it's a primary school in County Wicklow, which is nearly a commuter town of Dublin, capital of Ireland. And he has 2 children in the school. And last year, less than a year ago in November, he took some readings. He was on the school board, and he was on the Information Technology Committee of the school board. So, because he was a wireless expert, he checked out the system, and he learned that he was told that there were 22 antennae or Wi-Fi boxes in the classroom, and then he checked with the manufacturer. The manufacturer is called Meru, M-E-R-U, and their instructions were that it shows the installers how best to install the equipment. The manufacturer recommends that in a 20-room school, where each classroom has 30 laptops, in such a school, the manufacturers advise installing 10 Wi-Fi boxes. 10 Wi-Fi boxes for 600 laptops. The school that his children goes to has 30 laptops and 23 boxes. 23 Wi-Fi boxes for 30 laptops. One Wi-Fi box can support between 80 to 256 laptops. While his children's school only has 30 laptops, there's enough power being generated in those classrooms to power 5,888 laptops. Now, the children are being cooked, no doubt about it.
Of course they are. Absolutely. They're being sterilized, cooked, and they're certainly being genocided.
Yeah. So he made an approach to the chairman of the board of the school, and he was told that the power had been turned down, and yet they were still getting outrageously high readings, between 90 to 118 times more power than the
bottom
principal's
line,
office.
While they turned it down, it was still emitting deadly amounts of frequencies on his children.
And the system is industrial. It's an industrial system. It's not designed for classrooms. So It is. John,
I hate to say it, but it is absolutely designed for classrooms. That's what they've designed all of this to do.
Right. Well, that's what he's been told from his professional.
Yeah, it's an intentional assault on humanity.
Yeah.
It is certainly to reduce the numbers of children in given geographical areas. We know that. And it is to massively reduce the population. So as the story goes, continue.
Yeah. To shut him up, they sent him a solicitor's letter, and he's not allowed on the school premises anymore.
Mm.
So like most of us, like you said that you have children and grandchildren. I have a family, and we each of us, when we're aware of this, we want to inform our fellow human being. You're not much of a person if you let your neighbor suffer needlessly. And the children, if you can't protect your own child, what kind of a parent are you? So this man came to this realization he did a volte-face. He's flipped, not psychologically, but professionally. And he's jeopardizing, the rest of his career. He's got another 25 years to go. So so that resulted, because it's a Catholic school, and this is voluntary. The government will fund the installation of this equipment. So the next step would be to contact the Catholic Church. Well, it was an opportune time because the Pope came to Ireland 10 days or so ago, 2 weeks ago. And so why not seize the opportunity and try to contact the Pope and ask him to intervene in the Catholic school system? Now, the situation in Ireland is that they have, especially through efforts from the Labour Party, which is an interesting connection, but they have pushed the Catholic ethos aside. They're building a completely different educational system called Educate Together, where historically the Catholic Church has had an influence in the schools. Now, with the new system, Catholic Church doesn't have a say at all. Consequently, this man, he's gone to the government. They know him in the communications, the Office of the Communications Regulator, because of his reputation and his expertise, and he was getting nowhere. And so he decided to write the Pope, and I wrote the article based on his findings. Now, just today, incidentally, I received an email from the Minister for Health from his office saying that the matter has been referred to the Minister for Communications. Now, this is consistent around the world where health authorities are abrogating their responsibility. They deny that there is any major health effect. We know that there is. You have the evidence. I have the evidence going back 50, 60, 70 years. And yet they continued to deny the influence. So we're watching this closely. We don't know which way the ball's going to bounce.
Well, John, let me stop you right here, because if the ball is bouncing similarly to how it is in the United States, we all recognize that we're in a corporate control structure, a network of corporate structures that has ascribed to climate change, which requires the reducing of greenhouse gas emissions, which encompasses the illusion that we have got to go wireless to save on resources.
Okay, well, I'd like to address that corporate issue, because it's something that most of us who were educated in the American system, whether it was in a private school or in a public school, we weren't told the whole story.
Well, even now outside of school, we're being continuously psyopsed by the illusion that our vote matters, that we have a government that is weighing in on our benefit. We recently watched a very, very good movie called The Swamp, and there are 4 episodes to that. They're short episodes, but it is a movie done with legislators in their White House, D.C. government offices discussing how government doesn't work. And it is amazing, it is fascinating to learn from them that the staffers control everything. The staffers control the votes, the narratives, because everything is coming from the international bankers and the United Nations, and the same thing would be true for you.
Well, there are 2 points here. One is that communications falls under the law of the sea, which is different than what we are all led to believe about the law being the law. There is a vast difference, and corporations operate under the law of the sea, which they are using to exploit this program of globalization. So
Explain the law of the sea to the listeners that may not and likely aren't familiar, because no one has been taught this.
Okay, well, this is different. It's different than maritime law. And I would suggest that people look it up, because the corporate issue, this goes back even to Benjamin Franklin and the founding of the United States, and the becoming the District of Columbia with the distinct purpose of being a separate corporate entity, as opposed to an organic government coming from the people and giving us a voice. So this is something, the law of the sea rules communications, for instance, and that has much to do with the freedom to, it started with cabling the Atlantic and then the rest of the world. So it gives them free rein.
Well, it does, and there's also an excellent YouTube I would highly recommend that really does cover this topic as well, and it's called Babylon, USA. Yeah. And I would think in terms, when you watch that, whatever country you're in, it would apply in the sense that we've been taken over. You've been, everyone listening, wherever you are, you've been taken over too.
Ireland is a registered company in Washington, D.C. Australia is a registered company in Washington, D.C. So when we're issued with birth certificates, those certificates are making us citizens of a fiction, a piece of paper called the birth certificate then becomes collateralized. Numerous birth certificates are put together, and bonds are issued on those birth certificates. We each have a value. We are not part of the law of the land. We are part of a corporation. And that way they can do what they like, and we don't have a voice, and the politics then becomes merely theater. That's true.
And that is what it is. That's what it has been. And sadly, we are unknowingly, we're actors conscripted into that theater that you just mentioned. And it is getting so dangerous and so satanic. When you think about, again, the satanic pedophile systems that have recently been disclosed, certainly in the Catholic Church and elsewhere. And
well, just getting back to the Catholic Church, for instance,
let's do that.
As a practicing Catholic, it pains me no end to what I see happening. Over 100 years ago, Pope Leo XIII wrote a prayer saying that the crafty enemies have filled and inebriated with gall and bitterness the Church, the spouse of the Immaculate Lamb, and have laid impious hands on the most sacred possessions. What I'm suggesting here is there is a secret, a deep church just like there is a deep state.
Yes.
So the Pope, my objections to this particular Pope are that we had a referendum on abortion in Ireland because the right to life was enshrined in the Constitution. So those who pushed for abortion were granted the opportunity to have a public vote, and the country voted for abortion. Now, if I was the Pope and my church said no abortion, I would have been here before the vote to muster my troops to oppose it. This Pope did not come.
Well, I think it's pretty
after.
plain to see. Yeah, I think it's pretty plain to see his participation in this global shredding of all people everywhere.
And then,
yeah,
after he arrived back at the Vatican, he told journalists that he was at peace with himself.
Mm.
Now, in the interim, I was there when Pope John Paul II came to Ireland, and there was over 1 million people in attendance. And if there were 300,000, that's the estimate. So that'll show you how the ordinary people are responding, not to the faith, not to Jesus Christ, not to God, but to the machinations of what's going on within their church. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to, let people know that this is something that is going on behind the scenes, and what we're seeing, whether it's in our churches or in our politics, they are not the real thing. They're not organic. They're not life. They're not how most human beings see things. And even their own lives have been commodified to where they're simply numbers on a bond.
Well, that's exactly right.
That's a tragedy.
We're literally being harvested. We're slaves, and we're harvesting.
Okay,
They're harvesting
now that leads
all of us.
Yep. Now that leads me to the next point of this, because with the law of the land, then that means that the law
of the land or the law of the sea?
The law of the sea. From
Okay.
the corporate perspective, they can. Well, for instance, there's rumor that California has been sold. The murder of Lloyd Finicum over the grazing rights, because supposedly the mineral rights under the land where his cattle were grazing had been sold to Russia, the uranium.
Well,
so
yeah, actually, we know that through the bankruptcy of 1933, that the United States was dissolved and has been ever since by the annually reinstated Emergency Banking Act of March 9th, 1933.
You're absolutely right.
And the receivers of the bankruptcy were the international bankers and the United Nations and the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund.
Mm-hmm.
So the United States is USA Inc., and in fact, we're all living in Earth Inc. It's a large corporation.
Yeah.
And that is why we're having this discussion this evening from Ireland. We're finding that John is experiencing exactly the same thing. The Irish people are in the same can of worms that we are all in, being a corporate structure and being infiltrated with frequencies that are deadly. Even a man that... Yes, go ahead.
Plus, with the test and trial, they're testing on us first.
Oh, testing is over. Yeah, testing is over. Literally, they know the consequences of the enactment of all of these frequencies.
Yeah.
And they've known that for a long time. And what's really interesting, John, and you probably see it in documents that you look at too, I read oftentimes, for example, the deployment of 5G. They'll indicate that it is a pilot program in some areas. They did the same thing back in the day when we were opposing the smart meters on our homes. They said, well, it was a pilot program. That is psychological conditioning for people to only believe that they're testing it in one area. And for those that have concerns, they think, well, they're going to test it, they're going to see if it's okay, and they're going to find out it's not, and then they're not going to roll it out. That's not the case.
No,
all of these are global plans.
And this opt-out program is a laugh because they know that it may take them some time, but as people move house, as they pass away, that they will, before the next owner will have to put in a smart meter. So it's just an incremental thing that they're being patient, and everyone will have the smart meter by the time they're finished. But
with all the layers, though, that are being deployed on us with satellites, with cable, with all of the wireless water metering now, yeah, go ahead.
Don't forget Google Loon.
Oh,
Google
absolutely.
Loon was spotted over Fort Collins, Colorado, this past week. Wi-Fi.
Offering Wi-Fi to the people in rural lands, no doubt, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, but immersing everyone, everyone in it.
Yeah.
But a couple of things here I wanted to mention before I get into some of that is that this week, the headline story: my daughter went to bed and never woke up. Mom on the heartbreak of losing her child. Now, I know a father, the little girl was 14. Now, I knew a man who lost his son under similar circumstances at age 16. And they're calling it now sudden arrhythmic death syndrome, SADS. Now, SADS was called sudden adult death syndrome. So they're using the same acronym, and they don't even know how to how to hide it. But here the doctors reckon that the young girl died from this sudden adult death syndrome or sudden arrhythmic death syndrome, because both terms are used in the article. And up to 35 kids, let's see, where is it? But 30, at least one person a week is dying this way. And of course, she had her cell phone next to her bed. So that's one charity that they're trying to get off the ground now.
Are people awakening to this, John, as you're talking about this, with all the work that others are doing there? Are people becoming aware, or are they being literally mind-controlled now by the frequencies?
Pretty between the convenience of this wireless technology and the ownership of the media, word is not getting out. And I've taken to wearing, well, for the last couple of years, I've worn a net. It's 30% silver. It fragments signals so they don't affect your brain.
Now describe how that net is worn.
Okay, well, now people call me a beekeeper. Okay, now I don't wear it on my face, but I do wear it on the crown of and I wear a hat. And I wear the net over it, and I do
over
that
the hat on the outside of the hat.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I do that intentionally because when people tease me in the supermarket, it gives me an opportunity to say, "Wait a minute, you don't know what it's about." Indeed, I was at a wedding reception there a couple of months ago, and a fellow from Australia says, "If that guy doesn't take," he told my wife, he didn't know it was my wife, "if that guy doesn't take that hat off, I'm going to knock his block off."
Oh,
and then when she explained what the what the story was, he changed his tune. So after having, 11 years ago, I brought Professor Johansson over here to Ireland from Stockholm, and I had a public meeting with 300 people, and there wasn't a word in the media about what Professor Johansson had to say.
Yeah.
So I decided, other than passing out leaflets in my local community, that the only way I was going to make any headway was if I could get one person per day to try to listen, to at least listen to what I had to say. I will have done my job as a human being.
Okay, so now I want to add right now, everyone that's listening, you're hearing some actions that you can take and that you must take at this point. To do nothing is to do nothing. To say nothing is to say nothing. So when you ask all of us for a solution, you are the solution.
Exactly.
And that's why on stopthecrime.net we have a tab for flyers. You can go and you can download flyers and distribute them. You can make your own flyers up. Just look at articles and information and create information based on actual evidence. Don't hypothesize and come up with your own ideas, because all of what John and I are discussing this evening has patents. It's proven technology that has been advanced upon all of us to literally curtail our ability to function. So this is the level of the reality that we're in. So if you're not passing out flyers, if you are not saying things when the opportunity avails itself, when you're standing in line checking out at a store while there's still humans standing in line checking out at a store, then you are part of the problem. And I can only say, John, I know from what it sounds like you're doing that you're like many of us here, where every minute we're talking. I mean, our lives revolve around the urgency of the time that we find ourselves in.
You're absolutely right. The urgency of it. People are dying. People are getting cancer. I was in the local garden center, and I was talking to one of the people that work there who I know well now. But in the last 2 weeks, two of her colleagues have, one has breast cancer and the other has lymph node cancer, a woman 45. So, and this is in a large do-it-yourself shop, you know, a chain from England. So they are being exposed on a regular basis. Just like, interestingly, now here's one that just surfaced this week at Tesco. Tesco is the largest supermarket chain in the British Isles, and they've recently partnered with the French Carrefour.
How are you spelling that?
Tesco, Tesco.
Okay, thank you.
And the sign on the outside, as you're going in the shop, it says, customers will be tracked in the interest of safety while shopping. Now, I've taken meters in the shops, and there are hot spots. There's a small supermarket from the chain, not their big new ones, that have 60 antennae that are tracking you as you move. They're sending out a Wi-Fi signal.
Well, I'll just add at this point that the LA Department of Transportation has just announced that they will be scanning everybody prior to getting on to some of the transportation systems. They can do this at a great distance, and so that people are not inconvenienced, and they're saying it's for our safety. They're searching for any weapons. So we're being proliferated. We are being absolutely genocided. We know from all of the documents that we have talked about, both you, John, and myself, for years now. We've certainly brought forth Ollie Johansson's documents, Barry Trower's information, who is recognized as one of the foremost experts globally for microwave warfare.
Yeah.
And so many, many other doctors.
Well, here they've introduced what they call the smart port system for passengers traveling with cars in Terminal D at the port of Tallinn in Estonia.
So now describe what that means.
Okay. A new smart port electronic solution has been in use in Terminal D for vehicle traffic management. Mm-hmm. With the new electronic solution, automatic vehicle number plate recognition opens barriers to the port area automatically. That's just to the port area. That's not to the boat. That's to the port area. And electronic boards throughout the port easily guides drivers to the ships. Now, I was in Frankfurt last winter, and it caught me completely unawares. You present your travel documents to a machine, gates open, and you're confronted with another set of gates, and your photo is taken, and then the gate swings open.
Now, are they asking you when you have when they take your photo to remove your glasses? Because I've noticed that in airports.
No, the photograph is taken, and unless you're aware that this is happening, I mean, I was caught completely unaware.
Okay.
So it's by stealth as well.
Right. So they're capturing us. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've all been issued in Ireland with iris recognition technology, ID cards. They're supposed to make it easier to travel on the trains and buses that are equipped with the Tetra signal. You've mentioned it. I've come up with, there are 3 issues here, or 4. Tesco, smart port system, Frankfurt. It's happening everywhere, and no one is questioning it.
Well, I think by and large, and sadly, and very sadly, the psychotronic weapons system, along with the toxins and poisons in the food, water, air, has largely, and people are also overweight. The consumption of flour and sugar is putting people in a state of foggy thinking, unable to think. People have been literally neutered in the way that they can think. And it's been a very slow stealth. As you say, they're very patient with the delivery systems of death that they wage. Again, all of the opportunity around making huge profits, even in the cancer industry. Most recently, there was a woman in the Philippines who had a medical practice and was healing people that had cancer. She had created and invented some various approaches for treatment, and she was awarded a high achievement award. And the very next day after that, her clinic was shut down. Her life and that of her family and that of her patients were threatened because they don't want a cure for cancer. In fact, it just is astounding to many people when they hear about March for the Cure, when the cure is all around in certainly creating more profits for Big Pharma, because the cure for cancer is based on pharmaceuticals.
We've had the same situation here, and what the way it's done, and this brings me to another point, but the way it's done is the doctor is sued by a patient, and that the mere act of being sued destroys their practice. And whether the doctor wins or loses in court, he's still finished. There's one doctor here who was taken to court, found innocent, but the medical council wouldn't restore his credentials. wouldn't recognize him, so he couldn't practice. He can't practice.
Well, they are shutting down anyone that is outside of the approved medical modality of death, death treatment. And
including alternative therapists.
Absolutely. Well, that's absolutely the case. Absolutely.
So
for all that's listening, you have another opportunity, and that's to stay healthy. Get out of the food system. Try to drink clean water. You want solutions. Avoid all of these things as best you can. I wanted to say, too, because certainly we're all drinking toxic water, and I'm hoping that you'll get into a little bit of what is happening with Ireland with the new water regulations. But I first want to tell everybody you can order, at least we can here in the United States, through Whole Foods. There is a geothermal water company that bottles up water 2 miles deep, extraction under the mantle of the earth. They call it Mother's Nature. And so people can get to primary water. In some of the interviews that I've done with Paul Power, what we've learned is that the IQ in areas of and there are not very many areas in the world that have had primary water as their primary water source, they have had a remarkably higher IQ and intellect. So while we're being poisoned further, because what we know is happening with the water supply is it's now toilet to tap, sewer to tap. Everything is now going through water treatment plants. They're certainly now looking at massive operations of desalinization. And the problem, of course, with desalinization is they're, again, using waters from a highly poisoned, intentionally poisoned ocean. But then what are they going to be doing with all of the removals, the salt, etc., the poisons? Another way in which our groundwater is going to be poisoned. Now, keeping in mind, primary water is not groundwater aquifer water. It is water that literally is new water that's created underneath all of the rain and snow melt. So I think the best news, John, anyone's going to hear on the program tonight is that we don't have a water shortage, that we have primary water, and more people need to learn about it, teach our kids about it, and we're at the top of the hour. When we come back, we're going to talk to John further from Ireland and find out some of the latest assaults and attacks upon the people in his region.
We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Revolution Radio. This is Granada Forum Radio program with special guest John of Ireland and, of course, Deborah Tavares. Hold on. We'll be right back.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Hey, welcome back to the Granada Forum Radio program, ladies and gentlemen. This is Revolution Radio, and you're listening to special guest John of Ireland and, of course, Deborah Tavares of www.stopthecrime.net. Deborah?
Yes, prior to the break, we were talking about water, and I just wanted to alert everyone to the massive assault upon our water resources throughout the entire world. And right now here in California, and everybody says, oh, California is the testing ground. It's starting in California. It moves on to other areas. No, California is not the testing ground. The World Bank is assaulting all countries over water resources. And when you hear me from California talk about some of these rules and regulations, I want to emphasize and massively emphasize the fact that these programs are happening where you are as well, They might be a slightly different approach, but it is happening through your climate action plans, your resilient plans. And and what I wanted to say very quickly, John, and then I wanted to find out about the water situation in Ireland, but what we're now learning on top of other new water statutes that are being put in place is that the water agencies are now moving to regulate all the wetlands. And so what do we mean by that? Well, they want to manage the groundwater recharge basins and the irrigation ponds and seasonal creeks as well. And they're coming in with requirements to have permits over different bodies of water. They're redefining what wetlands are. They're including seasonal streams and other water bodies that they claim are crucial for wildlife and flood protection, groundwater recharge, and water quality. And there's an organization called Water Deeply. So everybody, you can look them up. Water Deeply has explored the California's proposal in detail, and it would be a broad new regulatory programs and what that would mean to industry and developers in California. There's a transcript that discusses all of this, and you can find it on mavensnotebook.com, MAVENS, notebook.com. And it's very important to understand what is happening with the takeover of the water supply. Yes, go ahead, John.
Here I'd like to give some people a bit of hope regarding the wireless water meters. There was such an uproar in Ireland where people actually took to the streets, and these groups have sprung up that call themselves the water fairies, or the meter fairies.
Oh my God, that's great.
And they go around at night disconnecting them or destroying them.
Well, I want to say, John,
they didn't deploy them.
Mm-hmm.
That's on hold. I have one outside my front door in the sidewalk in the footpath, and it's not working. They're not using that system.
Well, I want to say
at the moment.
Yeah, at the moment. Now, what we know is as there is a revolt or protesting against things, psychologically they will allow a victory simply to keep people in line so that people, by and large, are not aware of the enormity of the takedown and the lack of control or say that they have on an issue. We found that here with the smart meters, and we found programs out of the Brookings Institute that talked about the psychological maneuvering that corporations need to take when there is an uproar to skirt around it and then to go into areas that are certainly more amenable to this. We have, after the fires here in Northern California, they are deploying the small cells everywhere. And they've gotten around it now, of course, because the FCC has no regulations at all against any deployment of any wireless technology anywhere or any time. All the barriers have been eliminated.
Yeah, well, they're using the term here. I was at a course with a man who was fighting a mast adjacent to his farmhouse, and he has 4 little kids, and they use the ruse of national security. And once that phrase crops up in court, you know, the judge obviously is going to side with the power or the utility.
Well, I think everyone needs to read this book, Fruit from a Poisonous Tree, by Melvin Stamper, to understand how corrupt our entire court structure is throughout the world. It's all run through Rothschild and those affiliates. But I wanted to add something to the illusion of the court structure, and again, the illusion of victory. It is a temporary illusion just so that they can start deploying and putting their efforts somewhere else. Again, we saw that happening here in the United States with the smart meters and the lack of media. Now, out of curiosity, did the media in Ireland cover the water ferries, the water meter ferries? Or was that
they don't cover that.
Of course not.
It's just gone. The issue is quiet for the moment. Now remember, Ireland, we're probably the first country in the world that was fluoridated, the whole country, and it was done with the blessing of Cardinal McQuaid in the 50s. So,
well, it worked very well in the Nazi prison camps, didn't it, to hold down
didn't
dissension?
It just? And that can account for the placid, easygoing nature of the Irish. They're called the Fighting Irish, but when it comes down to brass tacks and the powers that be, for people to take to the streets over water, like California, we had a drought this summer. We had a hose pipe ban.
Now, when you mean a hose pipe ban, describe what you mean by a hose pipe.
You can't, your garden hose.
So you can't use your garden hose.
You can't water your grass. You can't wash your car. You can't wash the windows on the house.
So wait a minute. Let's back up. What I understood, you could use a watering can. Is that correct?
Oh yes, a watering can.
So all you can do in outside watering is use a watering can.
That's it.
So we're talking about your vegetables, your grass.
Yep.
People are actually having to walk out onto their lawns, or now not having lawns, right?
That's it. I was wrecked by carrying 15 or 16 watering cans after dark, watering my flowers and my grass, and particularly the tree in front of the house. We lost 7 trees along my road this year and they're false cherries. They're a wine-colored tree, and they have pink blossoms in spring. And to lose so many, of course, they're all facing the tetramast, 1,500 feet away or so.
As well as being sprayed with overhead concoctions from the toxic overhead.
The chemtrailing for the last couple of weeks seems to have eased off, and we are being allowed to have rain. This is Ireland.
So now let me ask you, when people are watering, because they do have satellites that track globally. And
they were using drones here.
Okay, so explain that. Talk about what that looks like there. What do you mean using drones?
That they've had several hundred people who were caught. And
caught watering illegally?
Caught watering, using which in a country of a few million, that's not people go along with the program. So, and they will in due course appear in court over this. Now, the hosepipe ban was June, July, and August. And when the weather was unusually hot and no rain, and now that we've had a bit of rain, not enough to replenish the reservoirs and things, but we have 70 days of water left in this country. So unless
70. So you're being told you have 70 days of water left. So what are you being told that when the 70 days is up, what are you supposed to be doing with the illusion of no water?
Well, no, they're not telling us that.
Explain then. Did I misunderstand?
Well, it's left, here they call it the long finger. In other words, we'll wait and see. After all, like Scarlett O'Hara, after all, tomorrow is another day. We'll deal with it when the...
Okay, so this reminds me of 0-day water, what was going on in Cape Town in Africa.
Right.
And the illusion of creating the idea that they were going to run out of water. What this did, John, is it forced a massive, massive relocation of hundreds of thousands of people for fear that they were really running out of water. So now, are you hearing amongst the conversation that people are fearful that they're going to run out of water, or are people becoming aware of primary water? What is the situation?
There's absolutely no awareness of primary water. None. Zero. Because historically the country has been so wet, and in the winter, it's gray. There's not a lot of evaporation. The climate is described as temperate. So the dampness and wetness is just part and parcel of life on this island.
Okay, so now what I think would be very important for everyone that's listening, because you're listening to John explain the fact that they're being told in Ireland that they've got 70 days of water left. And there seems to be no conversation on what that means.
None.
We will be talking again with you next month, or unless in between now and the next time we have you on, they tell you you're down to the last drop. Then we want to hear from you so that we can talk about the draconian methodology in which they're going to force people off lands. Now, here's what we know in the United States, and this is extremely important. The Department of Interior here in the United States has a map, and it is a map of a water crisis. In fact, I have it in one of my latest YouTubes that I would recommend everybody take a look at. It is on stopthecrime.net. Go to our YouTube channel. It's one of the YouTubes that was posted within the last few weeks. Right now, the date being September 7th, 2018. You will see that Department of Interior water crisis map. You will also note that they're saying that there are severe areas in red and less severe areas in orange, where they will forcibly take the water rights from people. Now, what the EPA documents tell us, John, and this I'm imagining would apply in Ireland as well, because we're all a corporation. Here's what the EPA documents are telling us. If you're in the country and you're outside of your city growth boundary, because they want everybody condensed into these mega cities, smart growth.
That's right. The American model of suburban sprawl is now out of date, as what we see what's happening with in Southern California, where the Rackham, Packham, and Stackham apartment blocks that are going up.
Well, actually, I could describe that a little bit differently, because we know that these are cyber cages. I call them human zoos.
You're absolutely right.
And literally, that is what they are creating. I want to add to the discussion of water, because again, the EPA is telling us in their documents, when they identify a rural country piece of property that has run out of water, they will, through the health department, forcibly relocate occupants off of their property into areas where they have potable water. This is a massive land grab. That's what this is. It is a land grab, because we have primary water. We are not running out of water. Water is a renewable. So while Ireland is teetering on this 70 days out of water illusion, it's going to be very, very interesting, John, for all of us to hear the mass exodus, to see how many boats will shove off into the ocean and start rowing somewhere else where there's more water. This is absolutely insanity, and how people could listen to this and believe it to be true is why the fluoride has worked out so well.
Yeah. It's ingenious. It's so clever, and unfortunately, it's easier to move people's bodies than it is their minds and their thought processes. You know.
Well, what they're saying, John, what they're saying in the genocide program that is on the Deagle.com website that we reported on.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying that there's going to be massive genocide numbers here in the United States. It's like 83%. It's a chart and a map. It's interactive, so all of you can
I've
you
seen
can look
it.
at that. This is by the year 2025. So with the illusion of running out of water and the mass relocation and the horrific transition of weather weapons and climate change, which is weather warfare, they're telling us that the methods of slaughter and murder are going to come about by people that, number one, psychologically are not able to handle relocation from the country into dense city zones. They also say there will be mass suicides. Now, that's going to, likely come in many ways. We know the psychotronic weapons systems and being able to put memes into our heads, literally speak into our minds as life becomes seemingly more and more hopeless with all of the loss of resources and the sales program that there's just too many of us. So I'm really very interested in the water programs in Ireland. I'm going to do some research, John, on that and we'll watch this closely, just like we did zero-day water in Cape Town in Africa. We had a backyard situation like a Universal Studio movie lot running out of water situation come down here in California. And it was very interesting.
Hello?
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 Did we lose her?
I'm here now.
Rich?
Hold on.
Okay, John, I think we might have lost Deborah. Hold on.
Okay.
It shows us she's still on the call.
Deborah, are you there?
Well, while we're waiting to get Deborah back.
She left off at the part where the Universal Studio lot, and then boom. I was waiting for the big surprise.
She's officially dropped off. I'll try and call her back right now.
Okay.
While we're waiting for Deborah, I'd like to carry on with a couple of other things. The
Go ahead,
point
John.
Dealing with the Vatican, I looked up.
We're unable to take.
I was in England and met with a gentleman who was helping targeted individuals, and we had a good long chat. And I said to him, "Where is this coming from?" And he said, "Well, as far as we can ascertain, it's coming from the Vatican's supercomputer." Now, if you Google Vatican supercomputer, you will come up with information that the Vatican is involved in transhumanism through its supercomputer system. So it is something that's totally alien to my beliefs of what a religion should be doing, but that kind of ties in with what I was saying about...
Well, I certainly got cut off, interestingly enough. So let me just wrap it up because obviously everyone needs to know about Mountain House outside of San Francisco and how they were creating that and creating the illusion of them running out of water. And when our research team called several real estate firms there and said, how are you going to sell homes there when you have no water? The real estate companies knew nothing about this statewide, nationwide conversation about Mountain House running out of water. They got busted. So I can say that Ireland is another larger Mountain House where they're creating the illusion of running out of water. And this is going to lead into a number of possibilities, John, where people are forcibly relocated out of the country, rural areas, into the city, and land thefts will become the name of the day.
Yeah.
And that's going to be one of the possible scenarios. Well, it will be one of the scenarios. And then the other scenario will be massive reductions of water usage. Who knows how many gallons?
That has been threatened.
Okay, so what are the threats? Tell me about what are they saying?
it's just the threat would be that water would only be available during certain hours. Full stop.
Okay, that's what they're already saying here. In Southern California, they're saying that dependent on your address, if it's an odd or even number, you can only water so many hours twice a week. That we are in a drought and we're under emergency
water. Well, it's not just water. It's the use of water for cooking and domestic purposes.
Interior, everything, showers, cleaning.
Yeah, no. Think about it. I mean, California is a lot farther south than we are in Ireland. I mean, if it wasn't for the recently deceased Gulf Stream, we're up there with Sweden and Norway. So we're very far north, closer to the North Pole, Iceland. So consequently, for us to have water problems, it doesn't make any sense at all in comparison to California, which has a drier climate.
Well, it underscores the level of global manipulation of the weather and the climate.
Yeah.
And we're seeing this worldwide. And so it's not surprising at all for those that understand the enormity and the power behind the use of weather weapons now. And so I'm going to be very, very interested to hear how the 70 days tick with this illusion of running out of water in Ireland. I would certainly hope that people in Ireland start going to primarywater.org and understanding that they are being massively deceived for a land grab, the theft of their homes, their properties. This is, again, identifying properties that, as we said a moment or two ago, before I suddenly seemed to have disappeared on this radio call, that this is theft. And we're all going to experience massive increases in weather weapons. We're being burned off the map here in California. And the fires are raging. And you know what's interesting, John, here? We have fires just above Lake Shasta, which is, a couple of hours north of San Francisco.
Right.
Maybe 3 hours north of San Francisco. Yeah. The fires jumped one of the main highways, Highway 5, that travels from north to south through California up through and up to Oregon. The fires jumped the freeway up in I-5 just 2 days ago. People were told to run, leave their cars because they were in traffic jams in a mountainous region, and the fires jumped the freeway. We're talking about a major thoroughfare. And do you know that I did not hear any local reporting on this? Mm-hmm. We were only hearing it from people that had heard, and if you hunt for it, you can find it. But they were not reporting this because this is all warfare using fire. Now they're using warfare on Ireland with the idea that you've got 70 days of water left.
Okay, well, this brings us to another topic that, and the question needs to be asked: who is doing this? Now, I've been in touch with a colleague. You may even know the individual, and the question is, who is doing this? Now, I cannot imagine anyone in the U.S. Armed Forces using this kind of technology on American citizens. However, there are a couple of other alternatives, and farther up the food chain, because there's another level called the UN. There is also the corporates that are using the law of the sea in space with the private satellites. So this, I'm just running this past you to not to name countries or to get geopolitical, But the fact is that the directed energy weapons that are being used against California, there are massive questions that need to be asked of cui bono, who benefits.
Okay, so
And
let's understand. Let's understand something here, because what is really important is that they cannot stop our access to primary water if people understood where water came from. We've sadly only been taught about rain and snowmelt, which is the secondary water supply. Yeah. And primary water is actually the evaporation that becomes rain and snowmelt. We did a YouTube, it's up there, it's called Primary Water Explained. Mm-hmm. For everyone that is being threatened by your corrupt government, that is a corporate structure, that you're running out of water and they've got to steal your land and relocate you, understand that you are being deceived about the reality of water in the same way that we have been deceived about where oil comes from, petroleum. Mm-hmm. Petroleum never came from dinosaurs. And so so it's really important. I cannot underscore it enough, but I am looking right now. I've just typed in, and it says Dublin's primary water supply could run dry in 70 days. And it says while the heat wave... Are you
checking on me?
No, I'm just I'm letting everybody know the enormity of what you just heard John say.
Yeah.
That Ireland is running out of water. Here's what they're saying. And they're saying that the greater Dublin area could be looking at its primary water source failing in less than 3 months. Now, I find it interesting that they're using primary water as their primary water source. But anyway, it says, while the weather in the country is returning to more normal temperatures, the level of rainfall is still far less than usual for this time of year. Now, keep in mind, primary water, we're the water planet. The rainfall has nothing to do with our access of an abundance, never-ending supply of water. In fact, we are the water planet. And one of the reasons...
I would like to make the observation that the use of primary water in that particular article would not necessarily relate to your
No, I
explanation.
know.
Because
the reason...
it's said here that the difference between America and Ireland is that we're divided by the same language. So primary here doesn't mean primary there.
Well, I understand that, but I find it to be interesting, and I understand we are divided by language and words and usage. But certainly people in Ireland need to use the word primary water and understand that Muammar Gaddafi accessed primary water for Libya, and it was
see what he got.
I'm sorry?
You see what he got?
Yes, well, he got murdered, and they blew up the Great Man-Made River Project, and they blew up the well drilling rigs that he purchased from the UK. They said that it looked like rocket launchers, and of course they knew that they were well drilling equipment. So what I would suggest, right now, is that people start putting flyers around your communities, because you're hearing this in Ireland. We just heard this in...
and it's in Sweden as well. Sweden, which has been plagued by fires all summer.
Right.
And I have one colleague who has 2 wells, and only one is functioning, and his neighbor's well is no longer functioning, and they live in the woods away from the big cities.
Okay, so it's very, very important for people to understand that the traditional well drillers, like doctors in the medical field, are not taught. They don't even realize that they can drill or how to get to primary water. You don't have to drill deep, but it is a different practical, boots-on-the-ground knowledge of what it looks like to drill. Typically, well drillers drill a borehole, they case it, and they gravel pack it, and then they drop a pump in it and start to pump. They don't know the kind of strata often that they're into. They don't bring the well on, which you have to work to bring a well up. In other words, you don't just drill, drop a pump, and start pumping, and that's it. You actually have to create the well, and you frack the well. This was very interesting to learn because we were on a couple primary water drill sites, and you put dry ice down the newly drilled borehole, and it starts to rumble and gurgitate, and it's dangerous. So you have to be extremely careful because the water then erupts out of the borehole, and it can go up, 40 feet. And the dry ice creates this, and it literally washes out the cracks and crevices and the fractures that are leading into the borehole, and it cleans out the dirt so that more water, you're developing the well. And no one knows that you have to develop a well, and typically you don't want to case and gravel pack wells. And that's why it's important to understand how to get to primary water and the importance of getting to water. Here, they are now creating bans against well drilling. So continue, because I am just flabbergasted as I look at 70 days of water left in Ireland.
This is something that you might find amusing, but it seems to work. The Irish, as we know, are superstitious isn't the proper word. They're very much attuned to nature. Watch the absence of birds, for instance. We've had the birds have been missing for a few weeks, especially the small ones. But the dowsing is not uncommon here.
Well, that is also a part of primary water location as well. It's an intimate connection with our
the land.
And with the land. We're all interconnected, and that is part of it.
Yeah, the Irish love the land.
I'm seeing right now for everyone that's listening, and John, you've just really brought forth something unbelievable to me, that Ireland is running out of water, and now I'm looking at Sweden's water shortage. I'm also seeing that the world is on the brink of running out of water. And
England! Don't forget England.
Oh, well, they're saying the world. And they're saying that experts are warning all the cities. And this is an article out of the UK dated April the 12th of 2018. And they say cities around the world are at risk of running out of water, with Cape Town in South Africa at risk, which is what we were talking about. And now they go on to say that there are 8 major cities running out of water. In fact, they were saying that Venezuela, which is a mass exodus, which represents the largest relocation of a population in South America's history, because the economic hitman teams are everywhere. And they're in Ireland, and they're shutting off their water.
And they're in Brazil as well. Brazil is in big trouble.
Yes.
I'm not just saying the Amazon with deforestation, but generally, the museum, the National Museum, burned down last week.
Yes, it did.
And
there's something wrong there. I've got to believe that there was a complete foul play in the National Museum in the country of Brazil. I'm sorry, but
they're terminating all historical memorabilia.
Sure,
we know that they don't want us to have any connection to anything.
Right, no history.
It would. Well, for the last 100-odd years in America, it was the Smithsonian's policy to ignore any prehistory, to ignore the Indians and anything further back than the American indigenous Indians who were there when the white man arrived. The Smithsonian intentionally, and I have the article here, intentionally wiped all of that away. We were never educated. I always thought, why didn't we have dinosaurs? And why didn't we have prehistoric art? We do have dinosaurs. They're digging up the bones now up in Minnesota and Idaho. so this was part and parcel of the matrix that they've created. But I'd like to just touch on a couple of other things because time is getting short.
Yes,
and
please do, John.
The one thing that is really important with the microwave issue is Europe has banned halogen light bulbs. So we can't have incandescent light bulbs. We can't have halogen light bulbs. It's all got to be LED. Now the way
which
they're
are highly
handling
poisonous and toxic,
Yeah,
and
well,
they're creating
plus
Wi-Fi hotspots out of those too.
Exactly,
Yeah.
which would be tracking inside your home.
And that's what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that just happened last week.
Well,
so
I want to read something, John. Here.
That's from the EU now. So
Okay.
we don't have a choice.
Well, we don't either. Here, the Department of Defense said we had to use LED lights because we had to reduce our carbon footprint.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about reducing
Yeah.
climate change. But I want to tell everybody this that's listening because I found this to be phenomenal. Some people here recently got refunds from the United States of America, the Federal Trade Commission from Washington, D.C., and there was a claim involved, and they were getting refunds, and it said, your enclosed check is a refund for Lights of America light bulbs. The Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, sued Lights of America over misleading claims about light output and life expectancy of its LED bulbs. The court ordered Lights of America to pay money to provide refunds. And it told these people, you're receiving this check because our records show that you bought Lights of America LED light bulbs. Now, people that are getting these refunds are kind of scratching their head, and they're thinking, well, how on earth did they know that we bought, these LED light bulbs from this manufacturer? And that's because everything is tracked and monitored. So if you are buying anything on credit cards, you're tracked, and they know exactly what you're purchasing. And the fact that the misleading claims about the LED light output and the life expectancy, because we know this whole thing is a hoax. We know that they are creating new markets, creating new green markets, bringing in all new technology that, by and large, doesn't work. And literally, they're eliminating our ability to survive. But continue, because I know we have limited time, John.
Yeah.
And I want you to get to more points here.
This it's a global thing, as we know, and the UN, yet again, in the last 5 weeks, I've received 45 press releases from the International Telecommunications Union, which is an arm of the UN. It's not a union. It's the United Nations taking control and how they are pushing digital and microwave wireless technology around the world. 45 press releases from the UN, leveraging the opportunities. Telecom
John,
World
I just want to add right now, while people are listening right now, we're going to be converting this show into a YouTube. And for the purpose of illustrating what you're talking about, John, if you can send a few of those over, we'll be certain to insert this in the YouTube. I think what we're discussing is so critical that people need to see exactly what we're talking about. So continue. So you've gotten 45 press releases.
Yeah, from the United Nations. Mm-hmm. How technology can help expand Social Security protection to all. How geospatial tools could help improve global health. There's one here for how it's going to improve life for seniors. Shorten them, but improve it while they're shortening them. How blockchain can improve telecom business support systems. Blockchain, how 4 young Saudi women hacked their way to a safer Hajj for all. How to address new smart city vulnerability report. Singapore and IBM partner to train tech apprentices. 4 ways to help AI improve healthcare and cut costs. From the UN, Now, my point is that the UN is not a legally nominated, elected body.
Of course not.
It's Rockefeller backed from the beginning. It goes back actually to Woodrow Wilson and his League of Nations, and then the creation of what they called the Creel Committee, which became the U.S. It was a committee to inform public information, and who was on that? Edward Bernays and a professor named Merriman, Rockefeller's University of Chicago, who was the expert on political science. And this is how, using the prototypes that they created back then, they were able to steer us into 2 world wars, possibly 3. And so consequently, the UN taking possession of this whole field of endeavor and promoting it. I mean, poor people in Africa, they're trying to sell them cell phones. Now, what in God's name? How do they even know what they do? Feed the people, help them, let them stay in their homes. Don't force them out to other countries.
Now, John, you're being too human right now. This is not. This is.
Well, thanks very much. I am not a robot.
No, you're not. But this is not the intention. We know that. And that's why that's why we have this radio show this evening, to inspire people to get out with flyers and start teaching the fact. We need to at least understand reality to come up with some solutions. Wouldn't you say?
Of course. Oh, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Now, another topic I would like to just briefly mention is that the city of Krakow is having its 3rd conference on microwaves.
Where is the city of Krakow?
In Poland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the significance of Krakow is that it was the administrative center of the Nazis for Auschwitz.
Right.
So the people of Krakow know firsthand and historically this authoritarian control. They know the dangers intuitively. Mm-hmm. It's the only city on the planet where they actually give people monitors to go out and measure the radiation that they're being exposed to. And if there are problems, they go to a clinic, and Barbara Galditska-Kalik conducts the clinic. I've been there, and they're having their 3rd conference anyway. And the 2 main speakers are Dr. Fiorella Belpaggi. She's from the Ramazzini Institute in Italy, and the other one is Dr. Marc Arazzi from France, and he's president and co-founder of the association called Alerte PhoneGate. So that is happening on the 24th of September in Krakow, and I'm certain if people are interested, they can contact me or indeed contact the Krakow City Council, and they would be more than welcome. It's a wonderful...
Welcome to do what? Well, what are you...
To attend. I'm saying attend.
To go to Poland. Okay.
And it will be... last year's was broadcast on the Internet. The first year, it was Professor Johansson and Cecil Helmoy of the World... It's a global organization of microwave EMF sufferers. This last year, it was Dominic Belpom. He is a doctor in France who has been treating people who are electrosensitive, and after he went back to to France, they started, as they did with Professor Johansson, attacking him, where he is now, I don't know the exact circumstances, but they were attempting to withdraw his ability to give prescriptions.
Now,
So,
when we come back up with you in months' time, would you please give us a synopsis then of this follow-up on what occurred during this Poland session?
Now, and the other gentleman was Professor Kashard, who's a professor of law. And now this year it's Fiorella Elpaggi. There's a video about her with Deborah Davis on the internet, or Dr. Mark Arazzi.
So now, again, for all that are listening right now, would you just give us a couple of sentences of what the topic of this is again? This is the meeting that's coming up in Poland.
Yeah. Well, this is the third one. We don't know if there's going to be a fourth one, but it is a conference with guest speakers to discuss the dangers of electromagnetic radiation. Okay. So that is, I think, really relevant to all of our concerns. Then I thought it relevant that Henry Kissinger gave the eulogy at John McCain's funeral.
Oh, God.
Well, it was certainly Illuminati charade, was it not?
Oh, God, yes, it was. Yes, it was.
I don't necessarily want to get into all of that. But,
well, we won't. We won't discuss about the fact that he did a hot start on the aircraft that he nearly sunk, the U.S. Forrestal. And interestingly enough, John, my husband was on the Oriskany, that was the aircraft carrier that went as a support rescue aircraft carrier with the Forrestal when that massive accident occurred, killing...
accident, yeah.
It was not an accident. Well, it was an accident, presumably, by a hot start, presumably. And prior to that, those people can go to YouTube and watch the variety of other accidents that Senator McCain was in crashing fighter jets. In fact, he graduated almost last in his graduating class, but we won't go there anymore.
Okay, well, I would just like to draw attention to the fact...
Kissinger and the memorializing McCain. Yeah, go ahead.
But I wanted to draw attention to the fact that the senator had a glioblastoma, brain tumor, and if people don't wake up, we've lost Kennedy, brain tumor, same thing. These people are on cell phones 24 hours a day practically, and then they wonder why they get brain tumors. It's common sense.
Well, it would be common sense, John, if the common sense wasn't attacked by so many weapons with the food and, again, the fluoride. People can't think. Honestly, they are not able to think logically. And that's why it is so important for everyone that is listening. Do not keep your cell phones in your homes. If you have any of the symptoms or multiple symptoms that you're going to see on the symptoms list on stopthecrime.net on microwave radiation and the symptoms of those frequencies, don't go to your doctor and take an assortment of big pharmaceuticals for a variety of impairments based on that, like headaches and difficulty concentrating and respiratory problems and slow reaction time, etc., insomnia. We also know, John, that the cell towers are being turned up during the time when most people are getting into deep REM sleep, which allows their bodies to repair, so that people are being awakened generally between the hours of 3 and 5 a.m. in the morning. And so we're under mass assault. Everyone that's listening,
like me on Granada radio.
Well,
it's nearly 5 a.m. But I just wanted to quote.
Yeah, 5 a.m. in Ireland. So I'm wondering how many people are out there watering their lawns, huh? Is it
well,
still dark?
I just might go do it now.
Is it still dark there?
It is.
Okay.
But I just wanted to get to the end here now by quoting Mr. Kissinger. The world will be lonelier without John McCain. His faith in America and his instinctive sense of moral duty. None of us will ever forget how even in his parting, John has bestowed on us a much-needed moment of unity and renewed faith in the possibilities of America. And yet the president who touts Make America Great Again wasn't allowed to attend.
Well, that goes to show how they reach out. That goes
so
to
much
show
for
how,
unity.
Yeah, well, that's a very important point. I think that was obviously understated in the press intentionally. But everything is understated in the press. In fact, most everything is not even true, what we're reading about. So I know...
Deborah?
I know... Yes, Wendy?
Oh, do you know that his vice president candidacy, the lady, she wasn't even allowed to attend. They would not let her attend the funeral.
Well,
Sarah Palin?
Yeah,
they wouldn't let her attend.
Yeah, okay, so it's just all a theater. It's just all to keep us wound into things of no real importance, while the killing machines are being advanced on all of us, while water is being withdrawn from us, while the frequencies are being turned up and slaughtering us. This is a silent weapons system being fully augmented.
The price of food here anyway, and the prices of everything are actually going up. We're at the beginning of hyperinflation. I looked at a garden shed on Monday, and it was $5,500, and today I saw it again at the shop, and it was $6,034.
Well, so will that mean
a 10% increase in 5 days?
Well,
Eggs,
I would.
Milk.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens when you start to pull the water supply out from underneath everybody. Then obviously the food prices go up. In fact, just for everyone that is listening, we're going to have a very explosive show on the next Granada Forum radio program. And, John, I will forward that to you as well so that you can see what we have discovered. And we're getting towards the end of the program this evening. For everyone that's listening, again, John is our overseas correspondent from Ireland. John, I am absolutely floored with the information that you've given us here in the United States, because I'll tell you something. When I'm here in Northern California and I'm not hearing about the devastating fires a few hours away, you can only imagine what we're not hearing about what's happening in Ireland. And we never knew. I never knew. You only had 70 days of water left.
And the other side of it is that I'm being blocked from accessing websites and other information coming from America.
Wow.
So what do you mean by that? Because we've got a couple of seconds left, and I'd like to know what you mean exactly by that.
For instance, and I don't understand why, but the Chicago Tribune's website is unavailable in Europe, but the Chicago Sun-Times is.
Interesting. Well, that's cutting down our ability to talk.
The censorship in America is big time right now, unfortunately, John.
Yeah,
well, throughout the world.
Including our emails.
Our
emails.
So for everyone that's listening, please listen on a regular basis to Granada Forum. We're going to have John back up unless, John, you call us and you've got the last drop coming out of your hose bib. And drones flying overhead, arresting people on site. Because I will tell you, this is a diabolical reality that we are all experiencing together, every one of us that is listening to this program. We're all experiencing this together, and we don't have all the solutions. We can report what is occurring, what people choose to do, what all of you choose to do. I hope at least getting the information out. John, from Ireland, what would you recommend in the last couple of minutes of the show this evening that you would recommend people do from your perspective?
Well, I would recommend is to talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends. When people turn their back on you, don't be afraid, don't be put off. Find someone else, because it's only by us as human beings talking one to another that we are going to have some kind of chance of fighting this, because it's our existence.
Or at least understanding that there's a percentage that are scheduled to be murdered in the genocide plans by 2025. Don't be in that percentage. Those of you that are listening, choose life. Choose to survive. Again, this is Deborah Tavares with StopTheCrime.net. John, thank you so much for joining us from Ireland.
Absolute
we'll have
pleasure.
you back up soon. Thank you. Thank you.
Talk soon. Take care, Wendy.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. You're the best. God bless.
Cheers.
This is